The opinions and viewpoints expressed in .NET Rocks are not necessarily those of its sponsors, or of Microsoft Corporation, its partners, or employees. .NET Rocks is a production of Franklin's Net, which is solely responsible for its content. Franklin's Net, training developers to work smarter.
Hey, Rockheads! Stop sticking erroneous phrases in your grammar and listen up. It's time for another stellar episode of .NET Rocks, the internet audio talk show for .NET developers with Carl Franklin and Richard Campbell. This is Lawrence Ryan announcing show number 569 with guests Stacey Harris, John Mullinax, and TJ Julie, recorded live Monday, June 21st, 2010. .NET Rocks is brought to you by Franklin's Net, training developers to work smarter. And now offering SharePoint 2007 video training with Sahil Malik on DVD, DNR TV style. Order your copy now at www.franklins.net. Support is also provided by Telerik, combining the best in Windows Forms, WPF, Silverlight, and ASP.NET controls with first-class customer service. Online at www.telerik.com. And now, the man whose Prius has learned to ignore his expletives, Carl Franklin.
Thank you very much, and welcome back to .NET Rocks. Carl Franklin and Richard Campbell here for your .NET listening pleasure. Hey, Richard.
How are you, sir?
Just flew in from Oslo, and
boy, are your arms tired.
I'm not going to say it. You said it, not me.
Yeah, that's it. How's the jet lag?
The oldest vaudeville joke in the world. Fine. No, I actually enjoyed the extra 7 hours of the day.
There you go.
I got plenty of sleep, which is good because I was lacking in sleep.
Did you notice I did not sleep much in Norway?
Yeah, well,
it was never dark.
Yeah, it's never dark. You really got to wear a sleep shade. The sleep shade companies will have a field day over there.
Yeah, but I was just astonished that we were routinely up past midnight, and plus the weather was phenomenal. So everybody was out partying all night. Well, and then you'd crash for a couple hours. I wake up 3, 4 in the morning. It's still light outside.
Yeah.
In fact, it's getting brighter.
Yeah. Well, we got a few things to discuss today. One thing to get into before we get into Better Know Framework. So my friend Ethan Weiner, who's going to be on the live weekend with us this coming weekend, and if for those of you who don't know what that is, Richard and I are going on the air for 3 days straight with only an hour break here and there to eat and an 8-hour break here and there to sleep.
Yeah.
I don't know why, but we're doing that. So if you just tune in, go to .NETRocks.com this weekend, anytime, starting Friday night. No, starting Saturday morning. That's right.
And running till Monday night.
Yeah, Saturday morning at 8 a.m. Eastern time is when we're starting. Running till, actually, the last broadcast will be Tuesday night because we're going to be doing repeats. So if you missed the first time, everything will be repeated once. Anyway, so Ethan Weiner, who you'll meet, or maybe you know who he is. He was the president of Crescent Software that did tools for Visual Basic back in the day.
One of the places where you got your start.
That's right. He was my boss. He pointed me to this great website at shrinkster.com/1E9B. And the story is, and this is from Home Studio Guru, Thomas Edison's voice resurrected from 80-year-old lost recording format.
Wow.
And there's a YouTube video there, or just a flash video or something, but it says, to hear an ailing 82-year-old Thomas Edison speak with the great inventor's voice, wheezy and high-pitched, growing husky and choked as he praised his good friend Henry Ford, who stood alongside President Herbert Hoover on a stage on October 21st, 1929, is catching lightning in a bottle. And that's exactly what it is. There's an old Palaphotophone which was a General Electric device for recording. They developed it in 1922. They essentially had this radio broadcast recorded, and it's the only recording of it. They figured out how to resurrect it, how to bring it back and digitize it, and you can hear it there.
Yeah, because something tells me they were sort of didn't have a player for this thing anymore.
Yeah.
You think?
It's a software problem, right?
Yeah.
So, shrinkster.com/1E9B for that. All right, let's get into Better Know Framework.
All right.
Every once in a while, something crosses my desk. I just got to share it. So,
got to talk about it.
Yeah. So for Better Know Framework today, I want to talk briefly about the features supported or not supported in Silverlight for Windows Phone.
Oh.
If you go to Shrinkster1E9A, there's a document there. And the things that are supported we've all heard, but maybe you haven't heard them laid out. Input, UI rendering, media, deep zoom, common language runtime, controls, layout, data binding, isolated storage, link, networking, specifically HTTP web request and web client, Windows Communication Foundation, XAML, ZAP packaging, and XML serialization. But there are some things that are not supported, including the new Silverlight 4 features, and then there's a link to those, browser host, dynamic language runtime, expression trees, HTML DOM bridge, JavaScript programmability, system.reflection.emit, Silverlight plugin object reference, sockets.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, no sockets. And that was the thing that crossed my desk that I had to mention this on Better Know Framework. There's no sockets, there's no JSON serialization either.
Interesting.
So the Silverlight SDK features that aren't supported are WPF controls, obviously, WCF data services, yeah, duplex communications over HTTP, JSON serialization, RSS, and Atom feeds syndication. You can consume RSS, of course, but you can't really syndicate, nor would you really want to. But
yeah, that sounds like something you should do on the phone anyway.
But sockets and JSON not supported.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Interesting. As of right now.
Admittedly, this is the first try, right?
Yeah, so. As of right now. So, hopefully we're saving you a little bit of time in case you were thinking you were going to write, the next big sockets application on Windows Phone. Anyway,
Who would
Richard.
think that? Who would think that?
Who's talking to us?
Oh, you want an email, do you?
Yeah.
This is an interesting one because the subject line is Australia.
Uh-huh.
Hi, Carl and Richard. Loving the show, but I have a serious issue with recent episode 563.
Dun, dun,
in that you answered an email about going to Tech Ed Australia and New Zealand, but I think you're missing out on a better trip, South Africa. Some highlights for your trip. It's Africa. Wild animals are everywhere. Not lions and elephants. Those are in zoos and game parks, but we have some really wild developers here.
Okay.
We are better than Oz/New Zealand. Just look at the rugby results. Long rivalry between our three countries, and we always win. Well, at least this year. Yeah, because I'm pretty sure they haven't always won. They're really sure about that, actually. And a bit of a late notice, but we're having the Soccer World Cup this Friday. Of course, this is a couple of weeks ago, so maybe you can use a time machine or something. I hope to see you in Africa soon. Robert McLean. An MVP from South Africa. Robert, we have received an invitation to South Africa. We've not been able to go yet, but it's definitely on our list.
Just because of a schedule conflict.
What's that?
Just because of a schedule conflict.
Yeah, just scheduling, trying to get everything in. We want to do it all. We want to be everywhere. It looks like Australia, New Zealand is going to happen. It's getting closer.
Yeah, that's right. We have been invited to Tech Ed Australia, New Zealand, and our calendar is free that span of time in August, so I think we're going to go.
Yeah, I'm only going to believe it when we buy the airfares. When we have our tickets in hand, then I'll be jumping up and down going, we're going to Australia.
But as of right now.
Yeah, we're closer. It's getting there.
All right, well, today's topic is .NET in your car, and let me introduce our three guests. Stacey Harris, formerly known as Charles Stacey Harris III, but don't ever call him Charles, is a senior software architect with Microsoft Services. Stacey's been part of Microsoft's Field Services organization since 1992. In that time, he's developed a wide range of software, including device drivers for custom hardware, customer service applications, e-commerce websites, prototypes for advanced aircraft instrumentation, and was even on loan to the Microsoft Cluster server development team for a short time. Stacy has a degree in theoretical mathematics and is entirely self-taught in software development. His first programming was at the age of 12 when his father bought him a book on the 8080 and Z80 assembly language, but because his family couldn't afford a computer, he wrote all of his code on paper and ran it in his imagination. That's awesome. Our second guest is John Mullinax. John is Platform Strategy Advisor with Microsoft's Platform Evangelism team. He works primarily with business and technology leaders at Microsoft customer accounts to help identify ways customers can dramatically improve their business with Microsoft's emerging technologies, and then marshals resources to get those solutions built as showcase examples that will inspire others to get the most of Microsoft technologies. Prior to joining Microsoft, John worked at Ford Motor Company on a range of projects, including in-vehicle computing strategy, enterprise architecture, project management, and IT strategy. Before Ford, John worked in elections administration for the Secretary of State in the state of Washington, and also served as a director of elections for Douglas County, Washington. TJ Julie is a technical expert at Ford Motor Company's Infotronics Research and Advanced Engineering organization based in Dearborn, Michigan. His research interests lie in mobile computing and secure privacy-preserving vehicular software architectures. His recent work involves architecting research software platforms to enable third-party software development on cars. He received his PhD in computer science from Stanford University. And welcome, guys.
Well, hello. Hi.
Happy to be here.
Well, I'd like you to identify each of your voices when you first speak, but I'd like to just start by saying this is a very interesting topic for me because last winter and spring I spent a whole bunch of time trying to write a in-car application in .NET and ran into a few technical difficulties, but for the most part it worked great. But I'll tell you about that as we move on. But Stacy, let's start with you. The listener might be getting the idea that we're talking about Microsoft Sync, which is the what we understand is to be Ford Motor Company's in-car .NET-based Microsoft computer. Is that what we're talking about here today?
Well, no. By the way, happy Father's Day, everyone. All you fathers.
You too.
No, so we're not talking about Sync here. And I'll let TJ go into even more depth on this. But what we're talking about is a platform for experimenting with applications that are a bit more powerful, applications that are internet connected and can take advantage of that connection. Of course, in a car, they're not always connected because you can drive through some dead zones. So we have to be able to write software that's pretty robust and can deal with a sort of sometimes connected network. So that's kind of what we're talking about. It's a little more advanced platform than what you have with Sync. We have full desktop hardware. We're running Windows 7 in the car, and I guess those are the sort of the main things.
And for those who don't know what Sync is, a lot of developers, when they think of Sync, think of the Sync framework, I think, which is something totally different. But just tell us what Sync is to differentiate it from what we're talking about here today.
Sure. TJ, do you want to jump in on?
Yeah, sure. This is TJ here. So Sync right now, so this is the Ford Microsoft Sync product. Sync is essentially a device that started out essentially, just doing a great job of connecting a music player and your phone to the driving experience. So you could, take any kind of a music player, made by Microsoft, Apple, or even just, a USB thumb drive with some MP3s on it, plug it in, and Sync would actually essentially index all the songs on the drive, and you could use essentially voice recognition to control playback. So you could actually perform fairly sophisticated queries, saying, play songs from Britney Spears, let's say, and it would actually find all the songs by Britney Spears and arrange it in a playlist for you. And this really kind of saves you the trouble of, going through and actually trying to manipulate a screen or scroll through playlists that may have to be predefined, or, imagine having to scroll through 6,000 songs on, any music player out there. It can become quite frustrating. So, it was really kind of the voice control that was kind of the breakthrough with the first generation of Sync.
Well, John, that's exactly what my application did. And and that part of it I got working really well. And I was using an AOpen box, which is one of the boxes that Richard likes to take around to conferences and show as his portable data center. They're these little, I don't know, what are they, Richard? Like 5 inches square by maybe 2.5.
6x6.
6x6, like 3.5 high, 4 high, something like that. And little Windows 7 box running on an SSD that I had wired in through the power system, so when it got a power signal, it went into hibernate mode. And I could just say into a microphone, play New York State of Mind, and it would, start playing. Or I could say, play the album 52nd Street or whatever. So that part I got working. The part that made me stop was I actually connected with an AT&T USB card, and trying to get that connection to either stay connected or not blow up or be able to boot the computer with the thing in. Just there were so many little problems with that that I just decided to stop developing it. But anyway, so that's what Sync is. And so let's talk a little bit more about this what are we calling this software?
This is TJ. We codenamed it FiestaWare because it's technically kind of a software hardware platform built on the new Ford Fiesta that's just now being released in North America.
Okay, FiestaWare.
This was the site AmericanJourney2.com.
So maybe I can just kind of back up and give kind of like a little bit of an overview of how we use the FiestaWare software. In collaboration with Microsoft and a company called Cumulux, we created this, software, essentially middleware. And then I went off to the University of Michigan at Ann Arbor and co-taught a class there with some professors in computer science, where we got a bunch of computer science students and a bunch of School of Information students that had a focus on human-computer interaction. And basically offered a semester-long course in which students actually designed software programs for the vehicle. And so these would be deployed to the vehicle, tested in the vehicle, and then ultimately we held a design competition, and the winning team of students actually was sponsored to go on a road trip with us cross-country to San Francisco to attend Maker Faire. Mm-hmm. And so it's that combination of the class, the road trip, and Maker Faire that we called American Journey 2.0.
Cool.
And it used the FiestaWare platform as foundation for the class.
Right.
One of the problems that I had that I imagine you're running into as well, if you say you're using the full desktop platform, is just little dialog boxes that pop up and stop things in its track in Windows that, without a screen and a mouse, are kind of hard to deal with.
Actually, to be honest, so all of our apps kind of went into full screen mode, and the inside the vehicle we had I believe it was a 10.2-inch touch screen. Mm-hmm. So we could actually interact with the software, sort of as you would with a desktop. Obviously you don't want to have like a really small mouse pointer and small buttons, but and then we really tested out the applications quite a bit. So we didn't really have any of these kind of like pop-up issues.
Right. We're running in a very constrained environment, so there's not aside from just sort of the standard Windows install, and even there, there's a lot that you can just not activate, a lot of services that you can not run. But really, the only thing running on that box is our application.
So you strip off all the other services that aren't required and break it down to a bare minimum. Don't you still have, Windows likes to pop up and nag every once in a while just for, various things. How do you deal with that?
maybe we got lucky, but essentially once we booted into the desktop, we had a script that would automatically start our app, and once it got there, it was actually very good with I mean personally, I don't think I experienced any kind of like unwanted pop-ups. I mean,
okay.
Yeah, our app was the only thing running, so we had nothing going on in the background except for regular OS threads.
We debated whether or not to actually run this on Windows Embedded Standard 7, the new Windows Embedded operating system, because then that would give us that greater control over what was actually running on the box, and we could package up a special build of the OS. But we actually thought in the end that it was better to stick with Windows 7, primarily because we wanted this to be really accessible to people and to feel really accessible to people.
Mm-hmm.
And we weren't actually going to know which services the applications were going to need until
right.
after people built the app. So, in an environment where you have a little bit more control and you have a little bit more certainty around what's going to be running, that's an option. And there's nothing about the platform that would prevent you from doing that if you had the platform. But we were really looking for something that was going to be as accessible as possible to the students.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking. Well, I was thinking of using the Windows Core server, which has no UI, and then being able that way I could challenge myself to write a sort of, meta program that was completely voice-driven, which is what I really wanted to do. I wanted to be able to do everything that you could do with this product with your voice. But so anyway, I guess you're saying you boot full screen, you eliminate all of the non-essential services, and you don't have those issues.
Yeah, pretty much.
Are you using voice command as well?
So yeah, that was actually included as part of the platform. And in the end, we had maybe like a couple of teams that took advantage of it. In the end, kind of most student teams actually just used the touch screen with kind of soft buttons.
Okay. This portion of .NET Rocks is brought to you by our good friends at Telerik, who want me to tell you about JustMock, Telerik's mocking tool. And unlike most mocking tools, JustMock can work with non-virtual methods, sealed classes, and static methods and classes, giving you complete control over your code. And of course, you get that great Telerik quality and support. You can read more and download the tool at telerik.com/justmock. And hey, don't forget to thank them for supporting .NET Rocks on their Facebook fan page, facebook.com/Telerik.
Yeah, I got to think the synthesis of touchscreen and voice is pretty compelling.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, definitely, I think that was kind of, on my wish list for how I would have improved maybe the class, maybe making the voice recognition APIs a little bit easier to use, perhaps.
Right.
But yeah, definitely, I think that there's a lot of, call for voice-driven apps in the car.
When you say soft buttons, one of my and I hate to keep bringing up my application, but this is what I have to relate to. I installed a mouse, a very small mouse that just had one button set to when I was holding the button down, then it would be listening to my voice. Because obviously the problem is, you've got a lot of passengers in the car, you've got noise, and I can imagine your passengers would love to have a field day trying to mess up your software if they could just shout stuff out to it. Do you guys do the same kind of thing? Have a button that must be depressed in order for?
Yeah. I think that drastically simplifies the problem of when to recognize speech, and it essentially solves the problem of kind of like missed recognitions, where you could exactly like you say, you'll be having a conversation, then all of a sudden the car just does something because you spoke a phrase that was actually a command.
Yeah.
Actually, Sync works pretty much the same way. When you push a button on your steering wheel, there's an audible prompt, and that lets you as a user know that now is the time to speak the command that you want to deliver to the machine. And the platform, actually, the FiestaWare platform, would allow pretty much the same behavior.
Awesome.
Right. This is Stacy. So even in with a constrained vocabulary, the car is pretty noisy, and just me doing some experiments. There are times where if you're in a noisy environment, even noises get recognized as part of the vocabulary. So, and that, it's like I said, even if you have a pretty constrained vocabulary, that's the case. So the
one thing
makes a lot of sense.
I'm sorry, Stacy.
Oh, sorry.
One thing that we did see the students take advantage of a little bit more was speech to text. So less examples of them using the voice recognition, more examples of them using, taking the speech engine and actually generating speech.
Yeah.
That was actually extremely cool.
Generating text or generating speech?
Sorry, taking text input and generating speech from it, so you could have an application. For example, the students that won the contest, they had an app called Caravan Track, and one of the things that would do is it allow you to, I guess I should describe the app so you have a little context, but if you think about a traditional navigation system, that gives you, yourself on a map and maybe a little bit of points of interest data around your location. But if you are on a trip with more than one car, say there's 2 or 3 of you, you're always on the phone trying to figure out, where's my friends in the other car? Are they ahead of me? Are they behind me?
Right.
Who needs to stop? How much gas do we have? Who's hungry? All of these kinds of things. And so it's actually quite complex to orchestrate the whole thing while you're on the road. And so they built an app that dramatically simplifies that problem. Instead of seeing yourself on a map, you see everybody in your caravan on a map.
Wow.
So the people in the caravan will go off to the website that the students built. They'll generate a join key, and everybody that enters the same key into their car will see each other on the map, and not only their location, but they'll see their speed at that moment. They'll see how much fuel they have, and they'll be able to send messages back and forth between the cars. Like there's a set of canned messages that were pre-built into the system, into the app by the students. So you can, if you're a driver going down the road, you can just push a button and it'll say, hey, I'm hungry, right? And you push the I'm hungry button. And what happens when you do that is every other car has the message from your car read out over their sound system. So if their sound is wired into their car stereo, for example, their car stereo system will read to them, John's car is hungry.
Again.
So
we just got back from a road trip. You're speaking our language here.
Oh, this is I'm so jazzed about this. What I would like to do is maybe voice messages. Just, if I say I'm hungry, why not just MP3 that and send it to all the other cars and play it?
Well, we didn't quite get there. Actually, we talked about that with the students a little bit, and they didn't get there. But during the whole trip across country from Ann Arbor out to California, they were working on the app, and they added a bunch of things. They added turn-by-turn directions on the way, on the road.
Nice.
Wow.
And they also added, or were working on something where you could actually directly edit the database of messages. So they had this, short list of canned messages in a database, and it just dawned on us one day going down the road that, you know what, if we just started posting things into the database, everybody's car will just start reading these things. And so you could have a passenger sitting in the, in the passenger seat typing whatever they want. So anything you said, if you're the driver, anything you said will be picked up by the passenger that's sitting next to you, typed into the database, posted up there, and then it'll read out on everybody's car. And so it's kind of like our own private Twitter network, except that it was all over the car stereo system. It was all audible.
One of the things that I wanted to do is, and this has huge implications, right? I mean, texting while driving and emailing while driving is a huge problem. And if you can use that interface to do those things, to have it read your email to you, or to, scan your email by subject, by whatever, say next, get rid of the spam, and then be able to reply and somehow, be able to concoct a message, whether it's a text message, a Twitter message, or an email message, and then send it all just with your voice without having to take your eyes off the road. I think that is not only compelling, but life-saving. Like your insurance should go down. You know what I'm saying? Insurance companies should be behind this.
I think the evidence of experience is that people take their devices into the car and they interact with them against all consultation to the contrary.
Right.
And so there's a school of thought that says you shouldn't do anything to allow people to use their devices in the car, because if you use devices in the car, then that creates a safety issue. And then there's another school of thought that says people are going to use devices in the car no matter what, and so you should make it as transparent as possible so that the user interface mechanisms that make sense in a car context work with the devices and the habits that people bring with them when they sit down.
Right. This is why I was trying to do a all voice, no screen kind of interface, because if you have a screen, you're inviting your passengers to look at it. And I know on my Prius that before I can use the GPS, I have to agree to a disclaimer that says I will keep my eyes on the road. It's like, you know, you will not be suing us because you were fiddling with your map and ran into, you know, somebody on the road.
The funny thing about that disclaimer is that it doesn't disappear when you start driving.
That's right. Right. It makes you.
So here you are driving, and you have to read this thing. Oh yeah.
It's so stupid, isn't it?
Oh. So I think one of the key things though about this platform, and it really is, like I said, it was really a research platform, right? But one of the key things is that it allows, in this case, students, but eventually, you know, pretty much anyone, to explore some of those ideas, to try some things out that, you know, maybe traditionally wouldn't be tried out. You know, you get people who are used to building these systems in cars in a certain way, and that's just what they think about. They think about it in a particular way without really any lateral thinking. And so,
and I like the fact that you're working with students because they do address this from a different perspective. I think all of us on the call here are old enough that, you know, we predate cell phones and access to the internet and so forth, but I'm suspecting that all these university students didn't, and they simply approach this differently than we're going to.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
So where can we get FiestaWare? Or can we even?
Yeah. So this is TJ. We're kind of in the process right now of just kind of getting it on CodePlex, and I just need to get my butt in gear on that.
Okay.
Well, and the cool thing about it is that even the tools now, so I'm not sure, I guess we didn't talk about this yet, but the core platform is built on the CCR and DSS, the Robotic Studio platform.
Yeah, let's define those acronyms if you don't mind.
So sure. The CCR is the Concurrency and Coordination Runtime. It's a sort of high-performance, message-based, multi-threading runtime that was built by the Microsoft Robotics Group. And the DSS, or Distributed, or sometimes people say Decentralized Software Services, is a way of building little services that talk to hardware or software, and to be able to put those services together, to use those as sort of a unit of composition for your application. Now, in the past, you actually had to buy licenses for the Robotic Studio and the runtime. And as of a couple of weeks ago, now you can get that free of charge. So you can get the runtime and the tools at no charge. They work with, and then it's the full set of tools, the visual programming language tools, all of the sample services and things. So you can now get that and use that in conjunction with the services that we developed for FiestaWare.
Okay.
And some of the services for FiestaWare are things like Twitter service, a GeoNames service that finds points of interest for you. We have Wikipedia lookup service.
I can't wait.
All kinds of GPS services and other, and even some things that talk to the hardware in the car, the CAN bus in the car.
Dudes, this is porn for me. I love this. You don't have. I mean, I can't wait. You better email me as soon as that goes up on CodePlex because I am all over this.
The thing is about Robotic Studios, it's really kind of the secret sauce, and Stacy did a good job describing it, but I want to kind of just layer on a little bit because to me this is so exciting. If you think about Robotic Studio, step back for a second, you think about Robotic Studio, and you think about the task of building robots. Well, Robotic Studio is software that fundamentally is designed to help you build robots first and foremost, right? And a robot needs to be able to accept sensory input from the environment and then act accordingly. Adapt its behavior based on what's going on around it to do the things that you want it to be able to do.
Yeah.
And what we're doing, and what Ford has done with FiestaWare platform, is they've taken that model and they've applied it to a car. And they say, you know what? There's tons of sensors in a car.
Right.
What if we could expose virtually all of them, and then allow you to build, as a developer or a technology and a car enthusiast, to build your own apps that react to that environment and adapt their behavior based on what's going on in the environment around you, whether that be, your speed, or whether that be, the fuel consumption, or whether that be your location, or any number of other things. And it's a really, really powerful model. When when I first let me stop for a second. Getting a little bit worked up.
Okay.
Get back.
Dude,
make sure I don't get too far off track.
Excited here.
Yeah, I really am genuinely excited about this. I mean, it's. I think it's industry changing.
Oh yeah.
This has been a really amazing project, but it's a first step, not a last step. It's not something that completes and ends and then it's done. It's a way for people who have long been interested in tinkering with their cars to finally have a way to do it. And if you think back to the beginning of the course, and I'm asking Stacy and TJ to think back to the beginning of the course, there was a moment when the guy doing the intro to .NET talk on the first day asked all of the students, "Hey, how many of you here have ever developed something in .NET in like early January?" A guy named Devaris Brown, who's an academic developer evangelist for Microsoft, and 2 people raised their hands. Out of a class of 27, there were 2 people that had worked with .NET, and that was in January. And by the end of April, everybody had working apps that not only were they .NET apps, but they were experiences that spanned from the web to the car. They took advantage of touch. They took advantage of voice recognition. They took advantage of text-to-speech. And they worked across the embedded vehicle network, collecting data and using data that was, coming off of the vehicle's CAN bus. None of them had ever done embedded development for the most part, and they didn't need to. And so it just took this really complicated thing of how do I build an app that spans across all these tiers? And it made it really simple, which is, if you think about it, exactly what a platform should do. It should abstract away all of the things that maybe you would have to do in its absence, and it's been a huge success in that regard.
It's amazing.
I mean, absolutely winning new minds and sort of making the platform transparent. It's more about the goal of making all this stuff work. We sort of danced on this briefly at one point, but the challenge of making connectivity work in a car, we got to deal with disconnected states and so forth. How do we cushion our developers from all this?
I mean, just the fact alone that that Windows 7 has a problem booting up when there's a USB device installed. I don't know how to get around that one.
So let me address the first one first, and I'll ask Stacy and TJ to jump in as well. But the platform itself actually includes SQL CE, so that you can set it up to automatically synchronize and cache and synchronize with SQL Azure, so that when you lose disconnectivity, you can gracefully degrade the experience, and then when you get connectivity back, you can gracefully resume the experience.
Nice.
Now, that wasn't necessarily. I don't think any of the students actually used that feature, but it's in the platform.
Were any of the students using Azure, like actually keeping stuff on the cloud?
A few of them did, not all of them, and it really came down to, for the most part, it came down to the learning curve. So that's not to say that there's a big learning curve with Azure, because if you've learned .NET or if you know PHP, then there's a lot of things you can already do in Azure. But when you're looking at learning WPF and you've never used Visual Studio before, and you've got to learn Blend, and you've got to learn Robotics Studio, and you've got to learn how to interface with all the services, it's kind of one more thing to learn, and so some of them just decided not to. And I think totally okay.
John, and again, emphasize how many weeks we had here. I mean, we're talking about 6 weeks.
Most of them built their apps in 6 or 7 weeks, and then they spent probably 6 weeks learning, primarily in learning mode, and then about 6 or 7 weeks in building mode.
Yeah. So okay. So even then, I mean, even if you're talking about the combined of 12 weeks, that's pretty impressive for people who are starting with no .NET experience at all.
Right. I hope the guys that did the Caravan Track app don't get mad at me for saying this, but John, one of the developers of that app, he told me at Maker Faire, he said, we actually only spent about half a week on this app.
But it was a solid half week.
Yeah, it was a solid half week. That's right, it was a solid half week.
No sleep.
Without eating or sleeping. Yeah.
But, they more or less did it in, 3 days, and there was 4 of them working, maybe they were working 16 hours a day or something, but they did it in less than a week.
Wow. Yeah, intensive. And from a Ford perspective, are these new engineers for you sometime in the future?
I hope so. I mean, we found, all of the students in the class were excellent. And especially so for the winning team. So we'd really love to see people of their caliber come to Ford.
Well, I'm finding in the .NET world that we have fewer and fewer of this younger generation of developers. That it seems like our developer cadre is aging.
Yeah. I really want to get back to this network connectivity in the car thing. How do you deal with stuff like booting up with a? I mean, do you let people use their Verizon cards and things like that, or do you have your own solution? Or
yeah, so what we built into the cards was actually we used a Cradlepoint 3G 4G router. So this is essentially it's just like a home Wi-Fi router, but it also includes slots for a 3G card and a 4G card, actually. And we used hardware from Sprint. So basically, the router kind of took care of creating the connection. So you're right. Sometimes when you plug directly, some kind of a 3G card into Windows, it'll have some connection problems.
Or it won't boot.
Pardon?
Or it won't boot. I found Windows 7
something like that. But so basically by separating it out, connecting it via Ethernet, and then all you have to do is the Windows 7 box just needs to get a DHCP lease, and then basically you're set.
Well, that means also that you have to have a desktop size machine in your car, right?
Yeah, I mean, so again, because this was a research platform, we didn't care about that.
Okay. All right.
I mean, if we were discussing production hardware, then obviously this would be a very different conversation.
Okay.
Right, and then you'd look at something probably like Windows Embedded and figure out sort of how you're going to go from there.
I see. Mm-hmm. So the idea of connectivity being lost and reconnecting, that is all part of the platform?
Yeah. I mean, I guess I would say there are tools, and John kind of alluded to this, there are tools that allow you to handle disconnection gracefully, but it is still sort of up to the developer. In other words, it doesn't automatically kind of, pre-cache things. Because, I mean, it gets pretty complex and very, very application specific.
Right.
So there's, only so much that the platform itself could really do independent of the application.
I hooked my program up to RSS feeds. So, and one of them was a weather service. So I could actually say, what's the weather in Boston, Massachusetts? And it would come back in seconds and say, the weather in Boston, Massachusetts is currently cloudy and 67 degrees Fahrenheit. I was like, yes!
That's sweet.
That is so cool, isn't it? And then the other thing was news feeds. I would have it read news feeds to me, and I could interrupt at any time just by pressing the button to go to the next one. But what about the stuff that Sync does with the voice controlled playlists and stuff? Are you able to do that kind of thing? Is there a framework for that, or is that something you just have to write yourself?
Yeah. So FiestaWare has it has a voice recognition API that includes sort of this same kind of functionality that Sync has in terms of like a sort of like a hierarchical command-driven menu. Mm-hmm. So, you can basically speak a keyword or a phrase, and then it will recognize that and kind of, take an action depending on what your utterance was. So, yeah, I think, using the framework as it is, you could create an interface that's very similar to Sync.
Okay. Doesn't Windows 7 just have the ability to load up a grammar and use the speech API rather, the SAPI? You could just load up a grammar and, I mean, what do you get in FiestaWare that's different from that?
Actually, that's exactly what we use. So then the key then is in, how much burden do you put on the application developer to create the grammar?
Right.
And so, we basically opted for a very simple API that, just lets you specify kind of like a list of command words. And then when a word is recognized, then it just kind of like throws that as an event. And then the application kind of handles it depending on which word was recognized.
So if I wanted to contribute to the project and add the ability to, play your music from voice, would I be able to do that?
Absolutely.
That'd be awesome.
I think I might.
Cool.
I can't wait to get my hands on these bits, Richard.
Get that sense, my friend. Yeah. I'm this though. I realized suddenly using that router solved a lot of problems in terms of the computer just not realizing it was disconnected, because it's always had a connection. It has a connection to the router.
Yeah.
The fact that the router can't get out just gives you all that. Gives you a delay while you can reestablish connections.
And you can always check. Am I with a .NET Framer? You can always check whether you're online, or you could use ping, or something like that. And if ping doesn't come back, you're down.
But all that stuff takes a while. So the fact that, typically handoffs and stuff that they have that little 30-second fart where you lose a phone call.
Yeah.
It takes longer for Windows to recover from recognizing it than it would be for the connection to be reestablished. So the router acts as a buffer to just absorb those short duration losses until the connection comes back.
Very cool. So are there any other features of FiestaWare that we haven't talked about? We got GPS, right? Geolocation. Right. We got basic networking.
Mm-hmm. So along with the GPS, we kind of have some, basic mapping. So you could essentially display, as Caravan Track kind of displays in real time where the other vehicles in your road trip are. Essentially, it's just sort of it's actually Bing Maps based. So you have basically all the functionality that Bing Maps provides in the vehicle. Let's see. You have a couple of social networking APIs. So you kind of like easily tie into Twitter, Foursquare, and
Yelp.
I think. Oh, Yelp. Yep.
What's that?
We have Yelp also.
Oh, tell us what Yelp is.
So Yelp is, it's essentially you could call it like a point of interest rating system, but mostly usually it's for, kind of like restaurants or coffee shops. It allows you to see other people's kind of ratings and comments about certain places, and it'll do, geographic queries if you're using it on a smartphone. So it's incredibly helpful.
That's cool. Well, and you just start thinking about the overall road trip effect of being able to share between cars, the people that aren't driving, looking for the next restaurant, looking for the next rest stop, just consolidating that kind of data. But even outside of the caravan, I think about sites like TripAdvisor and so forth. We could do a more real-time utilization of this.
The students that built the Caravan Track app actually had some features like that in their application that would allow people to say not only are they hungry, but here's a restaurant that I'd be interested in stopping at, and then different people could select different restaurants in different vehicles, and every vehicle would see the ones that came up, and they had ideas about maybe building this out to include like a little voting mechanism or something like that to, come to a consensus on which one they're actually going to stop at. And I don't think it was ever fully realized in their app, but that's exactly the direction that the app is going.
Yeah, totally.
Awesome.
Totally makes sense, and it's a lot of fun just taking that whole experience up to another level.
I never had more fun writing code in my life than working on this project. It was the most fun I've ever had writing code. Absolutely.
Well, usually the work that we do is sort of ethereal. There's something about it being in a car and actually talking to you that seems so much more real than a lot of the organizing of electrons that we do on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, I was going to say the fun part about this particular project for me, this is Stacy again, is not so much the code. I mean, I enjoyed writing some of the reference code and some of that. I mean, that was a lot of fun, but for me, the most amazing piece, the most fun, was the students. Watching these students, and we had programmers, we had UX people, watching these students just create some amazing applications and how fast they learn this stuff. I mean, that gives me hope that next generation of .NET developers is out there, but we just have to go out there and sort of make it real for them.
I agree. What a great way to get to kids.
Yeah, there has been this fear that .NET is now so complicated that new developers can't get into it.
Yeah, it's brutal.
Right.
Yeah, I think this is a point to the contrary.
Yeah, proof to the contrary, that there are folks that are starting from scratch, not knowing .NET and being able to be productive.
And Richard, now that you said that, I'm going to change my title on my business card to Electron Organizer.
You like that, do you?
I do. So when do we think? Let me say that again. So when do you think we're going to see the framework up on CodePlex?
Hopefully soon. We'll say that.
RSN, real soon now. Okay.
RSN.
Awesome.
I think that's part of our after action review that TJ and Steve and I need to do.
Well, I can't wait
for that. I've come to
that.
appreciate watching the challenges of getting our road trip tracking app on CodePlex, which ultimately have failed. That it's not a trivial thing to get projects onto CodePlex, especially when they touch a lot of different pieces of code.
Well, thank you, guys. This sounds great, and like I said before, I'm super excited. I can't wait to get my hands on it.
Great.
Thanks so much for letting us talk about it.
Oh, anytime. Come back and tell us and keep us updated on it. And we'll talk to you next time, dear listener, on .NET Rocks. .NET Rocks is recorded and produced by PWOP Productions, providing professional audio mastering, video, post-production, and podcasting services. Online at www.pwop.com. .NET Rocks is a production of Franklin's Net, training developers to work smarter and offering custom on-site classes in Microsoft development technology with expert developers. Online at www.franklins.net. For more .NET Rocks episodes and to subscribe to the podcast feeds, go to our website at www.dotnetrocks.com.
Got transmitter banned by the FCC. Yes, I'm a toy boy.